recruitment and retention model, Overture, a collaboration between 3 workforce specialist organisations in social care: Altura Learning, Care Friends, and Cohesion. And we have examples of the deployment of the Overture model to different degrees from several care providers, including Key Change Charity, Majestic Care, Bluebird Care, and Seren Support. But before we begin, a couple of housekeeping points. We will be sharing a recording of the presentation with you after the event. And we also look forward to your questions and observations. So we ask, could you please raise these as we move through the hour in the chat box, and we'll come back to them at the end of the session. So joining me today are Brian James from Key Change Charity, Wes Emmons from Altura Learning, Neil Eastwood from Care Friends, and our very own Dave Beasley from Cohesion. Key Change Charity have been creating caring communities for 100 years, and today operate 9 care communities for older people and 2 housing communities for homeless young people across England. Cohesion is a social care recruitment and workforce specialist dedicated to improving recruitment and retention in health and social care. Altura Learning are a market-leading provider of training solutions to the care sector. Care Friends, founded by Neil Eastwood, supports care providers to find high-quality care staff with a new employee referral app. Now, I'm going to hand you over now to Brian to give you the background on the partnership with Altura and Cohesion. Do we have Brian with us?
I think, Amanda, we are yet to have Brian with us this morning. So I tell you what, I can gladly jump in at this stage and give a bit of an overview. So no problems at all. So Key Change began working with Altura in 2017 and Cohesion in June of 2019. Certainly from conversations from the start with Key Change from a recruitment perspective, I know a big driver for Key Change looking at involving specialists in both recruitment and learning was a big part around time saving for their frontline teams. So allowing the Key Change communities to do what they do best rather than their time being taken up by a lot of the recruitment and learning admin that we all know exists on the front line. Certainly prior to Cohesion, Key Change had no central HR function. They had limited administration at each of the homes, and the majority of recruitment was managed locally by the recruitment leadership team. And certainly from conversations with Brian from the outset, we were all aware that there were endless hours being spent at every Key Change location, processing the inquiries, talking to applicants and trying to manage as best as possible with a limited support function. And anecdotally, we heard that one community prior to Cohesion was actually taking, I think, around 12 hours of their time to fill one position. And if I think of how that looks now, that's probably about an hour and a half of their time, predominantly around that final stage interview. So in engaging with Cohesion, the outlook of the organisation was very much to look at cost and time efficiencies, but also increasing the quality that candidates have through the recruitment experience, giving greater control and visibility to the spend and performance, and ultimately improved retention. As I will show you and share with you a little bit later, we've had some great achievements since June 2019 with Cohesion, and I know when we introduce Wes a little bit later on today, equally there's been some really good successes around the learning journey that Altura have supported Key Change to move forward to. And yeah, just talking about the learning situation, as you'll see on screen, training was commissioned locally within each community prior to engaging with Altura. And I think what we see across the board, whether that be recruitment or learning, where you have different locations doing different processes, following different guidelines, there's inconsistency, and that in itself can be inefficient. So certainly since Altura, there has been that level of consistency and quality that has been brought into place. And we're also talking about referrals today. So certainly at present, there isn't currently a referral scheme in place, but certainly the organisation is moving in this direction with the support of Care Friends. So if we move forward to introduce Overture to you now, in itself, Overture is a new recruitment model that includes access to online learning during the recruitment journey and increases referrals from applicants. So why, as a team made up of different organisations, did we create Overture? Well, you don't need me to tell you that recruitment and retention in social care continues to be a major challenge for the sector. We all know the factors that influence lengthy processes, higher competition, but we also believe there are real opportunities to sell the career pathways that exist, probably much better than most of us are able to do. It's the setting up of our stalls and showing the job market that we're a serious consideration when people are looking to consider a career in the sector. The cost of recruiting is reported at over £3,500 per hire by Skills for Care. So no wonder recruitment and retention consistently features as one of the biggest headaches for providers of all shapes and sizes. And although values-based selection during the recruitment process can support you to improve retention, the learning and training journey of a new starter is also very important. And in turn, we know will impact success both early on and throughout an employee's longer term employment with you. And in fact, nearly all surveyed employers with a 10% or less turnover rate had seen a positive impact on retention where they had invested in learning and development. And from our own analysis of over 3,000 exit and retention surveys conducted by Cohesion on behalf of a range of different care providers, we know that 3/4 of all new starters tell us that they're really hungry for that development as early as 12 weeks into their new role with an organisation. So people want learning and development, and they want it really soon into them joining with you. Now, of course, engagement is key to a successful recruitment process. Learning is definitely one tool that supports that. And if you can start sharing content early in the process, candidates will begin that learning journey with you, and in turn, they'll become better invested in you during their application stages. Care providers tend to report a large dropout during compliance or pre-employment processes. So that point post-offer, pre-start. Now for Cohesion clients, that typically sits at around 20 to 25%. But we know that some providers in the sector will report that as much as half of all people that they are offering. And certainly, you know, we're in very different times. We saw, especially at the start of the pandemic, at the early part of last year, an influx of applications to the sector. But then we also saw a lot more withdrawals that came through. And I think we were reporting a 10% increase on withdrawals right across our campaigns for the clients that we work with. So anything we can do to better equip candidates with their learning about working in care will support to reduce the withdrawals from the candidates we want. And that's the key, because we do want candidates to deselect themselves early on into a recruitment process if the role isn't right for them. And that's where the learning can really come in and bring the role to life. Now, engagement and learning may also impact a candidate's desire to recommend you to friends, family, colleagues, ex-colleagues, others in the sector, those from outside of the sector. And those people, candidates, prospective candidates, will make a judgment on you during their recruitment process. And as we'll look at a little bit later, as Neil talks about referrals and care friends, he certainly finds in his analysis of data that referrals absolutely is a better source of quality candidates. So it's definitely something to consider and look into making that process the very best it can be. So I guess the question is, why can't learning and training start sooner than day one in post? To improve that engagement, offer the sought after development, and are we doing enough to encourage candidates and reward staff when recommending good people? Remember, we all need to recruit over 500,000 more workers by 2035. So I think these are the questions we need to be asking. And ultimately, this is where Overture was born. And as the definition suggests, you may have spotted it earlier on, an introduction of something more substantial and an approach with the aim of establishing a relationship. We believe Overture does both this. It's a more substantial recruitment and retention model, and it seeks to establish better relationships with candidates and new starters. I just wanted to quickly share, before I bring some of our other speakers into the mix, some of the insights to the recruitment metrics that we've seen with Key Change Charity since going live. So yes, they're on screen. We started working with 6 of Key Change's communities, and since the successes we've seen, the service has been expanded to be open to all communities. As well as managing their recruitment for frontline positions, we've been delighted to be involved at Key Change conferences, carrying out interview skills training with hiring managers so they're really comfortable with values-based recruitment methods. And I think you'll see on screen, you know, the metrics that we see, which are quite typical from what we see across the sector for where we put our processes in place. The ability to have a real impact from having a really engaged recruitment process it is great to see, and we'll show you that Overture process in a bit more detail as we move through the presentation today. Right, so I'm going to, in fact, I can see Brian is with us from Key Change Charity. So I'm about to hand over to Wes shortly from Altura to give you some learning insights. Perhaps before I do, Brian, I'm not sure if there's anything else you wanted to add at this stage. You're certainly welcome to share any comments you might have.
Initially, just to apologise, I couldn't make the start due to work. So we didn't have and haven't had an internal HR department. We employ 300 people. We have 13 locations, 11 care homes for older people now. And what we wanted to achieve was a relationship with somebody who could recruit, but give the inquirer, the applicant and the pre-starter a positive experience of how we operated. And what we discovered was our registered managers on location struggled with that, because giving somebody who wasn't yet on your team a positive experience was not their top priority, because obviously they're very much focused on delivering what they deliver. You'll also see on the statistic on the screen that one of the significant factors of outsourcing and talking to cohesion was the 77% attendance at interview. The attendance at interview was the bit that disheartened the managers most about investing time in pre-starters. So what we achieved with Overture was actually engaging with the starter before they hit the ground through discussing our values, because a lot of the values-based recruitment is searching what their values are. And we can't just depend on communicating through our website what our values are. We should actually have that communication and that engagement during the recruitment process. And so what we've achieved through Altura and Cohesion is that engagement process, for which we're grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. That's great. Thanks very much. Brilliant. So let's introduce Altura and specifically Wes, who will give you some insights to the learning provision that's in place.
Excellent, thanks Dave and Brian, and hi to everyone. So I suppose just in case anyone hasn't heard of us, we're Altura Learning, and put simply, we're a learning community sharing best practice in care through our Skills for Care Centre of Excellence endorsed online learning. So working with Brian at Key Change, the team at Cohesion, as well as our other members within the community now, we've started to introduce some really targeted and specific learning really early on into that recruitment journey, as Dave was mentioning. And we're seeing some really positive results. So we're not talking just sort of mandatory training here, we're talking some really targeted and specific learning that I suppose gives new recruits not just an introduction to the care that they're going to be providing, but just as importantly, your organisation, the company that they're hopefully going to be working for. So obviously, with recruitment being such a challenge at the moment, I suppose we need to be thinking about how can we stand out amongst other providers in the sector, and equally, I suppose, how we stand out from other industries such as retail and the like. So from our perspective, I suppose engaging with the workforce from day one is of real importance, and I suppose remembering that learning doesn't necessarily have to be solely focused on care. We can also share learning on why your organisation is such a fantastic place to work for, and equally why our sector is such a rewarding sector to work in, which of course it is. So at the bottom here, I've just highlighted some examples of some of the innovative learning that we now see being shared within the community, and what we really see working and engaging within the community. So Dave, if you could just allow me to share my screen, I am going to be running through a quick example which I've put together. So this is an introduction to a career in care. However, as I say, there's lots of different examples. This is just one, and I suppose just bearing in mind that this isn't an Altura endorsed course. It's it's just an example that I'm sharing. So go. Hopefully I'm sharing the right screen. Ooh, is that the right screen?
We've got that, Wes, thank you.
You've got that, have you? Yeah. Perfect. Okay, so I'm just going to go in here, and as I say, this is something I just quickly created. So I've added in this I suppose this cover page, and this is a Skills for Care image that I've just found online, and I just thought it was a good image. Click into the course, and I've added a slide in here with a quick picture of why a career in care can be so rewarding. Just flick through, and then I've gone into and added a bit of information about the size of the opportunity in care, which I suppose we all know is absolutely huge. And then I've added some information here and some graphics about the importance of working within your community and the rewards which, you know, of working in your community, what that can deliver and bring. Again, using Skills for Care as an example, I've just gone onto YouTube and I've copied across this video, but it's a really good inspirational video. It's got a couple of really good examples of individuals and people starting their careers in care, and then we can just sort of play that.
I'm Hayley, I'm 21, I'm a senior carer and I work for Barchester Healthcare. Before my current job role, I was in the sixth form college.
Okay, so I'm not gonna go through the whole video, but it just gives you an idea of the sort of thing. So we watched the video, and then I've added a couple of assessments in. So I suppose from really the benefit being is that we're ensuring that they've actually watched the video, and B, I suppose that they understand the key values of working in and starting a career in care. So, which is all of the above. And again, then finally, there's a nice certificate that staff can download and print. So again, that's just really just a quick example. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, and Dave, if you wouldn't mind going back to the slides, I'll quickly go back through some key highlights of what we've achieved with Key Change. So initially we held a session with the leadership team at Key Change, and we shared with the team how they can create their own bespoke content, very similar to what I just sort of showed you there. At the same time, Key Change actually had a session with an organisation called Focus and Develop, where they learn how to use their own mobile phones to upload their own videos onto the learning management system. The last time we reviewed this with Key Change, they'd created 8 of their own bespoke courses. Many of the sort of examples that I showed you on the previous slide. Still got probably a bit more work to do, which we're going to be undertaking. And this is a really key. The next highlight really is really key. So 90% of Key Change staff are now self-enrolling on learning, and this is off their own backs. So this isn't mandatory training that's been mandated on learners. This is, yeah, people, as I say, enrolling in learning off their own backs because they've had such a successful recruitment and induction journey. So I think that's a fantastic achievement. And we're now seeing around 50% of learning completed on mobile devices. And I think we could probably all agree here that in this day and age, we expect learning to be available at our fingertips. So yeah, that will increase as time goes on, I'm sure. And together, this obviously equates to a lot of learning over the last year or so. So really just reflecting, and some final thoughts from myself before I hand over to Neil. If your staff have a really positive recruitment and induction journey, and including some really innovative learning, then they're much more likely to be successful, and they may even refer their friends and family to your organisation. Which brings me nicely over to Neil at Care Friends, and thank you.
Thanks very much, Wes. And it is a really nice dovetail actually into employee referrals, and hi everybody from a rather overcast Guildford. I think the first thing to say is to make the case for employee referrals on 2 vectors. And you may well know this. I know there are many people, very, very experienced recruiters on the session today. So I'd be really interested to know if you agree. But over a number of years, I have been asking registered managers to identify their highest performing members of staff, and then go and ask them what recruitment source they came through. And the donut on the screen at the moment is the answer to that, which you can see the largest chunk there, employee referrals, makes up, with word of mouth, about half of all high performers in social care. So these are sources which are often not targeting active job seekers. But when you look at the way we recruit in social care, we are rather over dependent on the active job seeker sources, particularly internet job boards, CV search, and so on. So what we need to do is to try and have a strategy that diversifies us away from internet job boards and more towards employee referral and word of mouth. Now, obviously, currently in COVID times, it's rather difficult to get out and do outreach in your local community. As you'll see in a minute, the Care Friends app addresses a lot of that. But before we leave this slide, I just wanted to point out internet job boards down the bottom there between 5 and 6 o'clock on the donut. If you think that about 70% of new starters a year in adult social care are coming via these active job seeker channels at the moment, it's really disappointing to see the performance of internet job boards in terms of high performance. And that's why it's so important to have an optimized recruitment process with some of the characteristics that Cohesion and Altura have been talking about. Okay, next slide, please, Dave. So I mentioned 2 vectors. That's the first one, is quality. We know that employee referrals are handpicked for their quality. It's values-based recruitment in action, really. So no one understands the job better than your own staff, of course. And then because they feel supported when they join, because they have a friend there, because they have a connection with the organisation, it rolls out into the first year's staff turnover. So as we all know to our cost, retention is a problem in adult social care, particularly in year 1. And what you can see on the screen here, the red line, first of all, is the average for all of adult social care as reported by Skills for Care. So as a general rule of thumb, you're probably going to lose about half of everybody in year 1. And the green line shows you what we've achieved with Care Friends, which is really employee referrals. Of course, all the app is doing, and I'll explain more in a moment, is bringing more of those people to you. So you may have seen this if you analyse your own recruitment and retention data, of course, that it's about half the staff turnover that you would expect to get from any other source. So the importance of plugging in employee referrals and maximising employee referrals as part of your recruitment and retention strategy, I think, is really important. You're very unlikely to get 100% of your new starters from that source, and probably as a guide, we're aiming to get that to about 20% generally. I mean, some providers do much better, but typically, if I speak to providers, they're getting just a trickle through their employee referral scheme. And this is a missed opportunity. Next slide, thanks. So when I looked at the employee referral schemes that were running, what we found repeatedly was an awful lot of friction. So it's very hard to keep reminding staff that they should recommend their friend, of course, and it's a bit boring to be involved in a referral scheme. You have to often get a bit of paper, fill it in. The admin is a real pain, so often people weren't getting paid, and typically we found there were a few super referrers in any organisation, and if they missed a payment or something happened, they switched off. Often people are waiting 3 or 6 months before getting any kind of reward. So their new starter, their friend, has to be with the organisation for quite a length of time before they get a reward. Meanwhile, the employer is paying money to an internet job board for no guarantee of anything. So this felt like a bit of a mismatch. And I was delighted when I came up with the idea of an app using what's called gamification, using the concept or elements of a game to try and make a business process like employee referral much smoother and more fun and engaging, that I got the involvement of Skills for Care, and they've been partners with Care Friends since before we started and through all of the pilots that we've done, and they've provided a lot of insight and support. So I'm delighted that Care Friends is partnering with them. And the way the app works, you can see on the screen here, it's very simple, really. It uses the concept of points, where a point is £1. So whatever your existing employee referral pot is, and the average, by the way, we think across adult social care is around £180. No one is giving exactly that, but most providers are giving 150 or 200, it seems, as a referral pot. And that pot is taken, converted into points, and then a few of those points are given early for the effort of recommending someone, for sharing a job with them, for them having a successful interview, those kinds of things, as well as the traditional way of rewarding when someone arrives at work and stays 3 months. There is another element to it as well, which it allows these bonus points or Care Friends points to be given to any member of staff for any reason. And this definitely wasn't my idea. It became something that was suggested and we took it on. And that is that anyone who has the app can be given very quickly, instantly, by a manager points to recognise, for example, completing training with Altura, for example. So you can incentivise a completion of training with a few points. You can say, well done for good work. You can offer an incentive for a shift to be picked up if there's one been dropped suddenly. So this currency is gaining traction throughout the organisation and making an impact on retention for everybody, as well as those people who refer. And you can see, since we launched in June last year, the care staff have really taken it on. So we've got over 150,000 jobs have been shared with friends, and that's usually directly with the friend they have in mind through text message or WhatsApp, but it can also be via Facebook, and that's really good employer branding in the local community, of course. So we're adding app users all the time, and the number of candidates is growing as well. But I'm not suggesting you have to use something like Care Friends. I think what's important is you should reflect on your employee referral scheme, and really this is an opportunity to maximise every element of that scheme. So really put some oomph behind it, because what we want to do is get as many people through this source to complement all of the other methods of recruitment. And we think there is about 20% extra new starters a year for most organisations just waiting in the local community as passive applicants. Next slide. So you can see just a bit of feedback. Obviously, it's early days for us. We launched officially, as I mentioned, in June last year, and we're just adding providers as fast as we can. But we're getting some good results back. Some of these guys were involved in the pilot, so we have over a year of data. And you can see, let's pick residential settings there. Majesticare are a chain or a group of care homes. This stat was before they completed the year, so I think they ended the year at about 83 hires via the app, where previously they had virtually none before Care Friends. So that represented about 18 or 19% of their entire new starters, and didn't include a couple of homes who joined later. So this is what we would expect to see, is that you can lift your number of new starters who are likely to stay much longer and be high performers. And you can see from the Bluebird Care comment that tripling referral numbers from an old scheme is quite a common thing we would see. And what Seren Support found, which we weren't expecting, is that the employers tend to back off their spend on internet job boards when they see the quality coming from other sources, particularly employee referrals. So there's savings to be made, and I think a lot of what's happening is redirecting that money or some of that money to employees, so employees are getting paid more as well. So I think this fits really nicely with the model, and I would recommend, if you haven't spent some time and attention on your employee referral scheme, now would be the time to do it as we're getting into 2021. So thank you very much, and over to Dave.
Thank you, Neil, for sharing that, and some great progression for the app already, and I actually have seen some great comments coming in on the chat on I think customers, Neil, who are already using the Care Friends app, which is really great to hear. And absolutely, referrals is such a great tool, a really good attraction source. And if you're not currently looking at your referral scheme internally, it's certainly something to consider. On screen is I guess the Overture process from an end-to-end perspective, really, which I guess I wanted to walk you through. And to mention, referrals absolutely is one part of that puzzle when you're looking at your attraction options. And Neil highlighted some of the I think, widespread concerns that we all see with some online job board activity. I'm really pleased to report that with the vigorous and the great work that we do at Cohesion, and the recruiters that conduct the values-based telephone screening on a daily basis, means that yes, we might all see that really sort of click happy activity and high volume, low conversion, but certainly, as Neil has mentioned, with the right processes in place, whether that be values-based recruitment practice, whether that be the right learning, we can certainly see some great retention from those sources. So yes, we're delighted to share this with you. So following that values-based screening journey that candidates undergo, a psychometric assessment that we've developed at Cohesion from the PhD we recently sponsored, specifically looking at recruitment in the care sector. So that's care character. Candidates who are successfully appointed from the interviews that are completed by Key Change community managers go on to complete our best practice pre-employment or compliance or onboarding journey. And effectively that's the bit where we're collating the references and completing DBS checks, etc. Now, the key for anybody doing this, as you all know, is regular engagement and communication touch points while we're waiting for those checks that we can't always control in terms of how long they take to complete. And at the same time, this is where the Overture model really comes into its own. What we're allowing is candidates to opt in to start some of their e-learning during that pre-employment time. So what you'll see on screen is as candidates are completing their pre-employment checks, there are a number of modules that we can switch on through the technology that Altura has shared with you today, and allow candidates to start that learning journey before day one in post, before that induction, before they actually step foot into their care setting. And as Wes mentioned, they can be a range of different modules that you could decide what you would want candidates to be starting at that point. You've got the ability to tailor what candidates have access to and when. That could be your own content. We certainly have seen some of our clients introduce short videos from CEOs welcoming them to the organization, and it's having a real positive impact in engagement and making people feel part of the organization before they've even joined. You'll also see that at the end of the process, we bring in the referrals, and as Neil has mentioned, the key is asking for those referrals up front. Don't wait until they're at 3 months into that employment. You start that activity early on, and you'll see some of the benefits from the outset. And we're delighted to have seen a really high uptake of our learning through the pre-employment journey. We don't make it mandatory, and I think this is really key here. We allow candidates to opt in and decide if they want to start that learning journey sooner. Some care providers at the moment are also introducing welcome sessions as part of their onboarding process. And given we've all moved to, well, a lot of us have moved to interviewing virtually via Zoom or Teams or WhatsApp, candidates, I'm really pleased to say, have really sort of taken up on that really well. They've been really open. They're getting on and moving quite happily into the digitalized world of recruitment during a pandemic. And there's an opportunity here for you to look at that online journey, welcome sessions, introducing them to your organization, talking to them about the journey they're about to embark on as part of their induction and learning and training program, whilst also inviting them to complete some e-learning. It has worked really well for many providers. And we shared our results previously on the impact of dropout during pre-employment, so post-offer pre-start. Really pleased to report that for Key Change Charity, the dropout between that stage is 18%, rather than the 25% we see on average. And as I mentioned earlier, the 50% some providers report. And as well as almost 90% of all new starters telling us that they've found the early access to learning useful, hiring managers are also commenting on the confidence they are seeing in new starters that are starting that learning on day one, and the positive impact it's having on residents and the people that are supported from the very beginning. And of course, it's great to see that almost all new starters have come back as part of their retention survey with us to say they're happy or very happy in week 2 of their role. We believe that access to early learning supports this message. I wanted to also share some of the feedback that we've had from new starters that have completed the learning. Some great quotes that we've had that you can read on screen. So what's next? Well, we'll continue encouraging providers to be putting and adding learning and training and engaging activity into their recruitment processes. If you need any advice or support with all or any of our individual services, reach out to any one of us. We'll all gladly support you in terms of what we're seeing, the successes we're having, and how we think you can have the most impact on looking at this. We'll most certainly be supporting Key Change and others to personalise training and engagement touch points, bringing them earlier into the recruitment process. I truly believe you can start this even before the pre-employment stages. So it'll be great to see how we can move that forward. And of course, we'd love to see Care Friends on board as well. Of course, we'd like you to connect with us, and that might be to explore Overture as a whole, or find out, as I say, about any one of our individual services within our organisations. Certainly from Cohesion's perspective, we know hiring managers might need support with interviewing and following a values-based recruitment technique. We'd love to offer you a free trial of our care character assessments. I mentioned earlier, and just to give you a bit more information, it's a tool that includes an online psychometric assessment. It was specifically designed for the sector, and the output of care character, so the candidate can complete a short 7-minute on average assessment online, with the output being 2 reports, one for the candidate to give them support on how to best prepare for the interview, and a second report for the hiring manager, which shows the potential against 7 qualities of care, but it also provides tailored interview questions that can be used as part of the interview experience that specifically probe around the qualities and support that decision-making process. So we'd love to offer you the opportunity to try that out for yourselves. Wes, Neil, I know we've got some information on the screen, but I'll invite you to share any final comments to confirm how the audience can get involved. And then what I wanted to do is bring Amanda back in, just to share some of the results we've seen from our recruitment future-proofing survey before opening up to the floor for questions. So Wes, Neil, any final thoughts or questions from you both?
Neil, you or me? No, nothing really for me, other than really what's been added. If obviously there's a link there where on the screen which will be shared, and that gives some examples and shows you how you can create and add your own videos, and some further ideas on what I elaborated on earlier. Obviously, if you'd like more and further information, then please reach out to us at Altura Learning. But yeah, that's about everything for me.
Thanks, Wes.
And I think, yeah, just to sort of wrap up from my side, I would say if we look at 2021, obviously we're coming hopefully out of a really turbulent time in terms of recruitment and retention. And I think one of the risks we're facing now is an exhausted workforce, and we need to work hard at making sure they feel supported. And obviously people that may have joined during the pandemic, we need to make sure they they feel like this is the right choice for them. So I think we've got a lot of work to do on retention, but as we've seen, the recruitment process has such an influence on what your retention rates end up being, that improving small changes in the process, as we saw, that Cohesion were demonstrating, in engaging through the onboarding process with learning. People love to learn, they love the instant nature of it and the feedback they get. And I think if you can add in referrals and widen, diversify your recruitment sources, if you are over focused on internet job boards, small changes like that will make a big difference and really set you up for a successful 2021.
Thank you, Neil. That's great. Amanda, did you want to jump in at this stage?
Thanks, Dave. So at Cohesion, we've been really intrigued with the extraordinary changes in the sector that over the last year may or may not have had an impact on where we all are on the road to 2035. And the big question at the forefront of all of our minds is, has the pandemic been a factor in speeding up the journey to finding the more than 500,000 new frontline workers that are required? Obviously, it's very, very early days, but we thought we'd share some of our early findings. And you'll see on the screen, we asked how confident you felt about recruiting for the future in your own organisation. And as you can see, there was a rush to the middle, with 43% feeling somewhat confident and 43% feeling confident. We also asked what you thought the perception was of working in care, both pre-COVID and post-COVID. And the largest group of respondents placed perception pre-COVID at 2 out of 5. And then the very same figure of 50% shifted to a 4 out of 5 for perception post-COVID. Now, our assumption is that the DHSC ads, Clap for Carers, and all of the increased coverage in the media that we've seen, along with very high requirements for frontline staff at a time when other industries aren't necessarily hiring, have all played a part in this increased perception. But our concern and our focus remains, how do we keep that perception high, and how do we keep it positive moving into 2021, as Neil's mentioned, with exhaustion levels now starting to have an impact. So a few more findings. Respondents also told us that candidates withdrawing or failing to show for an interview is rated as the greatest challenge in the recruitment process. I don't think there are any surprises there. We've touched on that today with results both before and after. We monitor this very closely, and on average, we expect 20% of candidates to not show. But in our experience, the more engagement in that recruitment process, the better the results that you'll see. And again, obtaining references and pre-employment being the second greatest challenge, no surprises there either. Actually, at times during the past 10 to 12 months, this has been even harder than usual. Hiring managers need support with conducting interviews and sifting applications. We often find that there's a gap between the recruitment team and a busy operational team whose roles are much bigger than just recruitment. So the more tools, the more guides, and more support all has an important part to play, both in supporting the best hiring decisions and making sure that values-based recruitment is embedded so that we've got a chance of hitting that 500,000 extra workers that we need. Very interesting, of course, to see the pace of change, and 90% of you expected video interviewing to continue in the future. I mean, without a doubt, video interviews have sped up the process over the last 10 months. But in our opinion, they should go hand in hand with other learning and experiential tools to make sure that candidates are also understanding the environment that they'll be working in. 75% of you would like more automation in the recruitment process. Again, this is great in our opinion, but really important to distinguish and make sure that any increased automation is engaging and not something that's making the process less personal. Probably my favourite one of all of these, 66% of you would like to collaborate with other care providers. and share access in some way to references or other pre-employment checks. Here we say, we are all for collaboration and sharing best practice, although we do wonder how this could be achieved. I suspect this would be a good topic for another webinar at some point in the future. So that concludes our whistle-stop short summary of the survey so far. You can still take part, as Dave's mentioned, and we will be returning to the results in future events through the year as the numbers increase. So we'll share details in our follow-up for how you can still take part. I'm conscious we've seen a couple of people drop out, so before we do move to questions, I'd like to take the opportunity to thank Brian and Neil, Wes, Dave, and everyone else that's taken part today. And of course, give a plug to our next session. So our next event will be in March. We will be focusing specifically on care character with Professor Steve Woods as our guest speaker. So more details on that later, and hope to see all of you there. So I'm going to jump into the questions now. We've answered an awful lot of them as we've gone through. So I'm going to have a quick look through to see if we've had any fresh questions. Oh.
Do you want me to pick up the one on paying people?
Yes, please. That would be great. Thank you.
I think
Thanks,
the key,
Brian.
So someone in the chat has asked about what about paying people if you're asking them to go online learning pre-employment. There is an issue that could be an issue at some point in a case about national minimum wage, but I think the key word is mandatory. So Dave made reference to this. Clearly, if somebody has already accepted the job offer and started with us and they are doing some mandatory training, we would be paying them. But during the pre-employment period, what we're looking at is a voluntary engagement with us. We've heard from them, we want them to hear from us, and we'd like them to get to know, and that's why we've seen the high take-up of 80%. So we wouldn't be paying, and we wouldn't expect them to ask for pay, because actually we see it as a discussion, getting to know us.
And just following on from that as well, Brian, from our side, when I sort of highlighted the self-enrolled courses, not everyone, but most people, as Brian was just saying, would pay staff for just the mandatory training. The self-enrolling, not only is it great and shows engagement from a learner's perspective, but I would say that most care providers wouldn't pay for self-enrolled learning. So it's almost, from a provider's point of view, it's really good, because it's actually free training.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. So we had the question earlier, which we responded to on the Q&A, but I thought I'd just go back to it. We talked a lot about pre-employment, and Olivia and Amy, actually, you asked what we meant by that. So we were defining pre-employment as the process post-offer prior to starting.
Amanda, we also had a really a great question surrounding demographics of new starters. So the demographics of new starters has a high percentage of 50+ years old. What's the average age of employees that use the app? And Neil, I think you kindly answered on the chat. Did you want to just sort of, for the wider group, just to talk us through that?
Yeah, I think things are changing, have changed rapidly, and I think COVID has digitized us all probably a little too much. So there's a very high take up. With the app, if you're an app developer, and I've learned this very recently, you obviously there's lots of data, alarming amounts of data, of course, about the demographics of the users that Google and Apple can supply, and so we took that data and mapped it against the demographic profile of adult social care, and there was very little difference between the two graphs when you overlay one on the other. And I think this applies not just to something like Care Friends, but there's a move towards more productivity apps and a lot more going on the phones of care staff, and really many of the older care staff, because they often have to rely much more on a phone than having a desk-based job like perhaps someone in the office care setting might be, They seem very, very familiar with it, quite happy. Of course, it does come down to the user interface and making things very simple to use. But I would say, you know, maybe the challenge in terms of digitizing generally is more around the pressure on registered managers with the amount they have to do. I realise that they've got a lot to do, and recruiters have been moved at home, and you know, and they're trying to manage there as well. So technology can really support that. We have not seen a big reduction in usage demographically at all. And as I mentioned on the chat answering Gail's question, our very first successful referrer back in 2019 in Cornwall was 59 years old, and she referred a friend who was under 30, which I thought was the right way round.
Thank you, Neil. That's great.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks, Neil.
Amanda, I've just picked another one out if you want me to.
Go ahead. Well, I was just going to make a point. Nilufer has mentioned that you feel that care staff should be paid for training. You know, I think that's a really interesting point, and you know, I suspect all of us would agree that if it was possible prior to starting, there'd probably be no argument about that. I'm interested in anyone else's view on that, and perhaps in particular, Bruce and Wes, with what you see, what other clients are doing. I guess my observation is, in opening up training to people in a pre-employment process, there is, of course, the situation that you're potentially training them for an other provider, should they decide to not start and go somewhere else. So I'm just interested in what everyone's thoughts on that might be.
Amanda, I'll pick this up. Hello,
Sure.
Altura. I think the definition here, and Brian spoke very well to it, is the difference between mandatory training, which is paid for, and then training in the pre-employment stage, which is a get to know you process. So a lot of the stuff that we see our members creating is this, you know, an introduction to the vision and values of the company. It's a meet the team. So it's a you know, it's a video of the manager that they're going to have, or a walk around the care home. We have a big provider up in the northeast who does a video of them walking around the care home, so that they're going to be, so that they're familiar with what they're walking into. So I suppose it's differentiating between the what we look at as training and learning, which is learning about personal care or learning about infection control, and actually the learning that we're talking about here is learning about the organisation and the industry that they are joining. So that's the key difference there. And because it's optional, it is you know, it's not paid for, and it's completely within the applicant's choice as to whether to engage with that or not. So I think as Amanda you spoke to there about learners or applicants taking that training and moving elsewhere, the model of how a lot of learning providers work now is that doesn't actually cost the organisation anything. That a lot of training providers in the industry now work on an annual subscription basis and have the flexibility to add people on and off the system without it being a per credit. So you're not actually paying for someone to do an actual formal course if you did want them to do that beforehand. So, but it's that real bespoke journey that is really key.
Thank you, Bruce. Hassan, I think you had your hand up for a question.
Yeah, thanks very much for a good presentation. And what I hope that we will get the slides circulated. But
Absolutely.
what I'm saying, that there is a pool of people who are redundant, like hospitality and hotel staff. And is there a way where we can work together? I am actually a director of Spectrum Care Consortium, where we have got 1,600 care homes. And your collaboration would very much suit us. And it's something which we can talk offline later on. But I know a lot of hoteliers who want to help the redundant staff to find an employment. And there's something which we can all work together.
I think that's a fantastic suggestion. And certainly over the course of 2020, I've heard of a number of providers that have actively worked with sectors who are either laying people off, and some of which were very informal, some were formal. I don't know if you've heard of Air to Care, which was a scheme to look at airport staff. I've heard great results in some pockets of the country.
We held fortnight seminar of Spectrum, and we would have 80 to 90 providers there. And we get various speakers to speak about. And that is where perhaps we can work together.
Marvelous.
And I think you see, as a community, it is up to us. How can we help people who are in difficulty?
Definitely. I mean, we firmly believe it always feels a bit odd to use the word opportunity when we're talking about a global pandemic, but you know, the reality of the situation that all recruiters in social care are in is that there are more people considering a career in care, and there is an opportunity to give them a preview into the fantastic opportunities that exist. Sadly, because of the circumstances we're in. However, I absolutely hear what you're saying, Hassan, and we'll certainly follow up with you after the event and see where the conversation takes.
What I think, you see, the perception, particularly the program like ITV, doesn't help us. But if we can make an organogram of how a carer can become a manager and earn £50,000, if it's good enough in 4 or 5 years, where would you get that kind of opportunity?
Definitely.
One of the skill gap in our industry is deputy managers. Because the manager has got so much work and is reluctant to delegate. And that is something where I try to train our managers that, look, your job is to look at them and supervise, not to work.
Hassan, you're preaching to the converted and really selling the opportunities and the career pathways is something that we totally agree is important in order to attract people to the industry. And far too often we hear the negative stories about the sector and not the people that have been on a trajectory to management, whether it's deputy manager or beyond. So it sounds like we're on the same page.
Yeah, I just don't want to brag, but you see, since COVID, since January, my home is in Stoke-on-Trent. I haven't visited. And the home with 2 bouts of COVID has been managed by management team.
Right.
And you see, it's up to how we can give them the trust, and they will work. And all my staff work beyond their call of duty.
Yeah.
I think you raise some really good points, Hassan. So let's pick it up offline, and then we can feed it back to the group when we get something moving forward. Thank you. Were there any other questions that anybody would like to raise?
I think what's been really helpful. So thanks Neil, Bruce, Wes. As the questions have started coming in, I've seen a lot of responses made on the chat. What I think we'll do, Amanda, just given the time, perhaps what we'll do is make sure that any of the questions that have been raised are answered, and we can perhaps include that on the landing page that we share post event. So that you can all see the responses that we've collectively talked about, because there's some really clear, this is a really great engagement point. I can see, lots of questions coming in. It's clearly an important discussion. So let's continue the conversation. And as we mentioned, do reach out to us if you wanted to.
So once again, thank you for everyone's time today, and we'll see you at the next event, but look out for the follow-up very soon from us. Thanks.